Pluribus episode 8 sets up the finale of season 1, and I'm not actually sure. Has Carol given up, or is she still playing the charm offensive? Welcome back to ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy, and let's talk about Pluribus episode 8. But before we get rolling into this episode, I want to shout out the folks in our Discord server who pointed out that Carol goes to the Jimenez Hot Springs on Gilligan's other show, Better Call Saul. This is where Werner Ziegler's wife was going to meet him in season 4. Carol also plays golf at the Albuquerque Country Club, where Jimmy planted cocaine in Howard's locker in season 5 of that show. And I also finally want to take a minute to point out the great color symbolism in this show so far. So the whole ScreenCrush team contributed to this part of the breakdown. On Gilligan's other shows, Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, color famously played an important role in symbolism for the characters. We actually did a whole video about this, but each character in that show had a specific color palette that reflected their personalities and their place in the story. And Pluribus is doing the same thing, with colors having deeply symbolic meanings. We just wanted to wait a few episodes before we talked about the symbolism, so we were clear what these different colors were symbolizing. The two main colors of the show, so far, are blue and yellow. Blue symbolizes the joined. They're watching Carol from spy satellites in the sky, and they even tell Manny to wave to the sky if he needs anything. Episode 5 begins with this shot of the blue sky with a hexagonal netting symbolizing a beehive.
Not the bees! Ah!
And to contrast, yellow symbolizes individualism, specifically Carol's individuality. She is wearing a bright yellow jacket in the first episode, and when she makes her anti-joined vlogs, she's always wearing yellow. And every time she wears blue, it's always with an agenda. She's trying to get closer to them and learn to earn their trust. Similar, when she asked this member of the joined for individual opinions, he is wearing yellow. She also writes about the joined with a blue marker, showing that she's trying to understand their way of thinking. And when she wears blue in episode 7, she is doing things that would normally be group activities, watching fireworks, playing golf, etc. And in this parking garage shot, the two main colors we see are yellow and blue. Notice she's hitting the balls from the yellow painted stone of the garage, and she's smashing the blue windows, implying that she's poking holes in their idea of unity. Manny also displays his independence by driving a yellow car, and he turned down help from these men in a blue truck. He's wearing earth tones to keep himself grounded, but he switches to wearing blue when he's in the jungle, when he's finally offered aid from the joined. And at the end of episode 7, Carol seems to accept death when the firework is aimed at her face, and that firework turns her face and the whole screen blue. In a sense, this is her giving up and accepting her fate. Afterwards, she switches to wearing white, which often symbolizes innocence, purity, and bliss. After using white paint to send a message to the joined up in the blue sky, again, she does this because now her intentions are pure, Zosha arrives in a blue car. And she's wearing pink, which symbolizes femininity, softness, and romance. And this all fits in with color theory and psychology. Yellow is symbolic of willpower and optimism, and blue represents calmness, stability, and of course the sky. The joined are deeply tied to the sky. The RNA sequence that created them came from space. Carol also notices that they're flying jets overhead in tandem. And as we theorized a few episodes ago, their hive mind might be networked through radio waves, meaning that they are all joined by the sky. It's actually really fun to go back to the show and rewatch everything after you know this. Now, the title of this episode is Charm Offensive. A couple episodes ago, Carol learned that confronting and cajoling the joined didn't work. So now she's taken a page from the book of Casanova McBoner. Now, that guy is a self-obsessed, indulgent person, but he knew more about the joined than Carol because he wasn't afraid to ask.
Out of curiosity, I asked John Cena, why do people drink so much milk?
But this episode is bookended with Manny traveling to Carol in spite of his wounds. So we open on a blurry blue environment, which of course symbolizes the joined, as a red drop of blood intrudes on this scene, just like how Manny is intruding on the plans of the joined. And notice how blue is the dominant color of the operating room. Blue tablecloths, blue scrubs, etc. Outside the OR, notice this woman is drinking a bottled liquid. This is probably more of the HDP that we learned about 2 episodes ago. But it's not in a milk carton because remember, they bottle it up wherever resources are located nearby. In this case, a bottling factory. And look, I believe in the free market as much as the next guy, but Manny is way too dedicated to capitalism here. My guy, in some countries, healthcare is just a human right. You got hurt on the wrong side of an imaginary line. You don't owe that hospital a thing. So, much like Harry and Lloyd, he travels north collecting IOUs to pay his way. Meanwhile, in Albuquerque, Carol is getting used to having another person in her life after more than a month all by herself. She mixes up powder to create lemonade, similar to the HDP powder that the joined use to create their protein mixes. Now at first, they have a hard time picking a board game because Zosha has the sum of all world knowledge and would win at everything. Like as Carol says later.
It's like playing cards with fucking Google.
Which, by the way, is getting to the central concept of this series. We have talked for weeks about how the joined are like a living embodiment of the internet, or AI. But this episode is all about finding their limitations. For instance, they can't trace the origin of the card game Spit.
We know it originated in the UK during the 80s. There's different theories as to who named it, but no clear answer.
And this actually reminded me of a Vox article I read years ago that tried to trace the origin of the S that we all drew in elementary school. But even the hive mind of the internet could not solve that piece of child lore. Sometimes human beings spontaneously create things, and this is something that the joined could never do. Similarly, AI is just a language model. It can scan the internet for information and then rearrange it for us, but it can never truly create anything original. It's also interesting how Carol, the moment she's no longer alone, is suddenly ashamed that she stole this O'Keefe.
I was about to return that.
Now compare this to Casanova, who takes everything he wants as if he has a right to it all. Then, to contrast with Manny's insistence on paying for everything, Zosha reminds us,
there's no such thing as ownership anymore. No private property.
And to prove it, she shows Carol where they sleep, huddled together, like animals in a hive. Carol points out,
This isn't going to turn into the orgy scene at the end of that Matrix movie, is it?
I mean, look, technically that was in the middle of the second movie and it was more of a rave than an orgy, but she's not wrong. It was a weird scene. And then we meet Bear Jordan, which is an excellent name for a dog, and I want to say he appears to be a very good boy.
Yeah, he's okay. He's done some stuff you don't want to know about.
Carol takes a moment, awkwardly tries to excuse herself, and then opts to sleep with him. And this is where, look, I'll be honest, at this point I did not know if this was genuine or not. She got really low when she was by herself. She tested the limits of loneliness and stopped caring whether she lived or died, unless that was an act. I mean, so that made me think at this point, maybe she was briefly opening herself up to the idea of being one of the joined. That is, until she returns to the whiteboard and punctuates, "They eat people." This begins her charm offensive, gathering intel on the enemy by just asking questions. Notice she is wearing more and more blue as she attempts to appear like the rest of them. But then we do learn some interesting facts that line up with our speculation. Zosha says that the joined communicate through electromagnetic waves that are broadcast by the brain's neuroelectrical activity. This explains how they were able to spread in those first few days, like when they were just making out in the hallways of the lab. But remember, a few episodes ago, Manny actually heard some weird signals on a long-range radio frequency. And this is probably how the joined are actually staying united over long distances, through radio broadcasts. We also learned that the hive mind is aware of what individuals experience, but only individuals feel physical sensations, like drug addiction, massages, or truth serum.
Having said all that, this massage feels good.
And Carol also learns about the solar system where the RNA sequence originated. It's a star called Kepler. Now, this might be a nod to another post-apocalyptic show about a Carol and the End of the World, where Earth is about to collide with a planet called Kepler 9c. Great show, by the way. It's on Netflix. No one's paying me to say that. I just really love that show. And I want to point out that during the massage, we can see the scars on Zosha's back from the grenade shrapnel. Now, we learned that Kepler, the planet, is actually an enormous ocean, a world covered in blue, in other words, which makes it an appropriate starting place for the joint. And we never actually get to see the star through the telescope, but we do get to see this God's eye view of Carol looking at the star. And this is similar to various shots we've seen throughout the series. For instance, of the joined gathering around Zosha when she was having a heart attack, or later this episode when Carol is lying in bed with all of them. These shots always emphasize the power of the hive mind and how individual minds don't really matter that much as part of a whole. And then we see Carol's new whiteboard where she's cataloging what she's learned. They sleep together, body's electrochemical charge, individual feelings, the signal that came from Kepler, and most importantly, they are spreading. The reason they are so eco-efficient is because they are using the entire world's power grid to try to send more signals into space. It's likely that the joined did not actually originate on Kepler. Kepler might have just received the signal from another world, and God knows how long this process has been going on. And then Zosha delivers a new box of blue Sharpies and says,
We are just so excited to have something new to read.
And I think that they're being genuine here and they're not trying to deceive Carol at all because, they can't. The joined actually do want to assimilate new information and new writing, like the internet or AI would. They can't create anything new for themselves, so they are hungry for a new experience. Then they play croquet, starting with a blue ball because this is the color of Carol's charm offensive. They're also wearing white because in croquet tournaments, the rule is that you have to wear white from head to toe. Now, croquet is also a game that is about control. Once you hit somebody else's ball, then you have the power over that ball to hit the next one. So the game is actually about slowly assimilating the other players, which is exactly like the joined, who slowly assimilate the human race. And it seems like they are finally reaching a kind of equilibrium, right? The joined have learned to trash talk with Carol in a way that she likes.
Maybe you just suck.
Which gives them the illusion of individuality that Carol also enjoys. And this makes you realize this episode is not just about Carol's charm offensive. The joined are also trying to charm her. And this takes us to what I think is the key scene of the episode, in the diner, when they present Carol with a gift, a recreation of the diner where she began her writing career. Notice the back of the booth is yellow, and Carol reminisces about writing on yellow legal pads. Again, yellow is the color associated with individuality and with Carol herself. Now, this is the kind of simulation that, say, Casanova would order the joined to create for himself. He likes having the world revolve around him so he can pretend to be James Bond. But for Carol, this is horrifying. This is not a genuine moment. It is a recreation of a genuine memory. It's essentially your Spotify Wrapped, reporting what you listened to this year, but not actually recreating those moments where you enjoyed the music. Notice how they even have cars driving around outside to make this feel more real to Carol. And after she leaves, the cars abruptly stop. Now this calls to mind the brilliant film The Truman Show, in the scene where Truman works out that everybody is watching him and he can control traffic. And I also want to shout out the Instagram handle Cinema Goldmine, who pointed out that this diner was also used in the film Mulholland Drive, and these two scenes do appear to mirror each other. Now that movie is about a blonde woman with a strong physical attraction to a mysterious dark-haired woman as she tries to navigate through her own mind, similar to how Carol is trying to navigate through the minds of the joined. Now that night, she and the joined finally drop the act. She admits that she will never stop coming after them, and they admit that they knew that the whole time. And there's an intense moment here when Carol almost breaks down, remembering her weeks of loneliness.
Someone has to put the world right, even if it means you all leave me again, even if it means that I'm...
In this moment, I think Carol means this. She is remembering that month of living alone and how scary and painful it was, and she's thinking she's going to double down. So this is really ambiguous and great storytelling and great acting from Ray Seahorn. I want to know what you guys think. Do you think that Carol at this moment is actually starting to crack? Is this where she says to herself, I can't be alone again, that was unbearable, and then she decides to give in? Or is this just another level of the charm offensive where she's trying to convince Zosha and the others that she is willing to compromise? Well, either way, she finally gets what she wants. And that kiss was foreshadowed all the way back in the truth serum scene.
Why's she gotta be so goddamn f***able?
The next morning, she finally takes her book series in the direction that she has always wanted.
Raban is a woman now.
All right, so not 100% sure what's going on here. Is she actually deciding to take pleasure in her writing by making Raban a woman like she intended? Is she saying screw it and living the rest of her life in this apocalypse? Or is this simply a deeper level of the charm offensive? Is she distracting the joined with new material for them to assimilate so they think she's given up? And notice how the joined are instantly like her admirers back in episode 1.
Which Lucasia is... definitely allergic to.
They just have to get their hands on Captain Virgil's
Temporal compass.
They don't just know the lore, but they obsess over it. And then we go to 60 days out. So she's been living with Zosha for a couple of weeks, and she's looking at Helen's grave when suddenly Zosha's image eclipses it, implying that she has taken Helen's place in Carol's life. Notice that Zosha is getting better at using singular pronouns.
I like omelets.
And Carol is able to pry an individual's perspective from her.
I love mango ice cream.
So this makes me think she's still at it, right? She's trying to see how much of an individual mind is left inside of the hive. Also notice Zosha is in blue, but Carol is back to yellow. At this point, she's definitely back to employing the charm offensive. The closing song of the episode is You Gotta Be Sure by Traffic Sound, and the lyrics match Carol's mentality regarding letting Zosha into her life. It says, I've been trying so hard to make it on my own, and you gotta be sure. It's about how life is too hard to go through solo, but you can't let just anybody in. You got to be sure that you can trust the person before you get close to them, which mirrors the way that Carol has been keeping Zosha at a distance until she finally broke down last episode. But the joined know that this fragile truce is about to be threatened when Manny arrives. He patched himself up in the back of an ambulance, and we see it pull away through a tunnel, similar to these other shots in the episode, like the tunnel where the joined sleep or when they were looking at the stars. In each case, the objects in the foreground create a sense of distance between us and the subject. In the arena and the telescope scene, the distance reflects a lack of knowledge as Carol learns more about them. But with Manny, the tunnel shows a possible divide between his perspective and Carol's. Is she still all in on stopping the joint? Is she about to gain an important new ally? Or is Manny going to be the person who reminds her that they have to save the human race? And by the way, how's Manny going to react when he sees that she is literally sleeping with the enemy? Well guys, that's just everything that we noticed about this episode. Let me know what you think down in the comments below or in our free to join Discord server. I gotta say the chat there about Pluribus has been great. It's like the internet before it became awful. Join our Discord server, it's totally free. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe, smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.